G'day everyone, Elden Ring Nightreign is out, and the solo mode is brutal. When I first jumped in yesterday, I was humbled very quickly, and I've played my fair share of Souls-likes. I know it's a co-op game first and foremost, but it does have an official solo game mode, and I know there are plenty of people who prefer going solo for all kinds of reasons. So today, I've got 12 tips to help you get started in solo mode. These will definitely help even if you're playing co-op, but just keep in mind, I'm looking at this from a solo player's perspective. Strap in because it's going to be tough, so let's dive in. So first of all, what class should you play solo? Personally, I think Wilder is going to be your best bet. It's reasonably tanky and has solid all-round stats, which is great for weapon flexibility, since you can't always control which weapons with good skills you'll come across in this game. It also has a cheat death passive, which is obviously invaluable for solo players. Grapple is just generally useful both early and late game, and the ultimate, Onslaught Stake, is great for raw damage, especially stance damage, perfect for breaking tougher bosses later on, and for dealing AoE burst in those nasty duo fights. Your next best options are going to be the Iron Eye, Recluse, Executor, and Duchess. All four are solid picks. They offer good damage, range damage, some of them, mobility and utility across the board. But they're all quite squishy, and none of them have a cheat death passive, so there's far less room for error. These classes are going to be better suited to players with a higher skill ceiling, ideally people who've played Elden Ring before, since that experience goes a long way in this game. The two I probably wouldn't recommend for solo play are the Guardian and the Raider. The Guardian's damage and skills are just a bit underwhelming on their own in solo play, and both of them, especially the Raider, have short, fat roll dodges, as in they have less invulnerability frames than the other characters. That being said, all characters are strong in their own right, and you'll probably do the best with the character you enjoy the most. The next most important thing to set yourself up for success in a solo run is nailing your early game plan, especially levels 1 to 5-ish, and doing it efficiently and safely. When you first spawn in, hit the nearby basic camp that's always near you. Clear out the enemies for some quick runes, a few consumables, and maybe some early weapons or loot. Right after that, head back to the nearby side of Grace and level up to level 2 straight away. This is important. From there, you want to target two main map features, either a cathedral or a fort, which look like these on the icons. You'll nearly always find one close by. The cathedrals, when they don't have an elemental modifier, which is this little symbol on the map, they will have, by default or baseline, a stone golem, which are great targets, easy at level 2. You can walk right up to them, and as they're taking ages to stand up, hit them in the legs, in the little kind of red glowing spots, with 3 or 4 charged heavy attacks, and then, this is why you want to play Wilder, use your Onslaught Stake R, and that will stance break them very comfortably. If you're not Wilder, you just have to do a few more attacks to the legs. After that, as they fall over, move up to their chest and critical strike them to the chest. This has a massive modifier for the stone golems, and it'll kill them pretty much from half health. If you started nearby a fort, that's also an excellent target at level 2 or 3. Inside, you can take out the Abductor version pretty easily, just again using your Onslaught Stake ultimate. This is also a great spot to use any fire pots or throwing pots that you picked up in those first few camps. The forts will have quite a few loot chests and consumables all over the place, so make sure you stock up. And right in the top tower, there's also a map clue, which is very important to go grab, as it will show you the locations of scarabs, which I'll talk about later. Clearing 1 or 2 of these fort and cathedral level map features early on is a great way to get to level 3 and 4 very early with minimal risk. Let's talk briefly about consumables, which ones to look out for, and how to use them. There are a lot of random consumables in the game, but not all are created equal. Consumables can make a big difference, especially for the night bosses. Throwing pots are just generally great for clearing trash throughout the open world. I recommend using them liberally. They're not going to be super useful for bosses, but they are awesome, especially when there's multiple packs in an AoE situation. Just throw a couple of pots in there and it'll make a big difference. The key consumables to watch out for your night boss preparation are going to be your elemental greases, the crab or prawns for defensive buffs, and the exalted flesh for an offensive buff. Starlights are also going to be very useful for FP regeneration if you're using a skill heavy or a magic heavy build. Now there's a pre-buff procedure I recommend before the night bosses, and it really helps. Each boss area, as you probably know, starts before the boss with a wave of more basic enemies, usually around 10 or so, before the boss itself spawns. You can use this phase to your advantage. Clear all but one enemy, ideally one of the slow, weak old men with a walking stick, or just whichever one's weakest. Once there's one enemy left, take a moment to scroll through your inventory and plan your buffs, have a look at what you've got, and have a think about what's coming up. Apply your prawn or crab for defensive, exalted flesh or elemental grease for your offensive ones, and use a starlight fragment or a warming stone to top off your HP or FP as needed. Then you can kill the last mob and you'll enter the boss fight with all buffs active and at the full duration possible. The next thing you want to watch out for as you're moving around the map is the Marika churches. These little churches on the hill with this icon. There are always 3 in every map, and inside each one, at the altar, you'll find an item that gives you 1 extra flask charge. This is super valuable, especially for solo play, because it effectively increases your healing and overall health pool going into a boss fight. You ideally want to grab 1, maybe 2 if it's convenient before the first night boss, but don't waste time running around the whole map chasing all 3 early, it's just inefficient. Prioritize 1 or 2 if it's convenient on day 1, and then on day 2, make sure to grab the remaining ones so you're stocked with 6 or 7 healing flasks for the second night boss and Night Lord. Now you're going to want to build specifically against the weakness of whichever Night Lord you're facing. If you haven't noticed, at the start of each expedition, just before you enter, there's a small icon that tells you what damage type the Night Lord is weak to. For example, the first boss is weak to holy damage. You can target that type of damage for your weapon by heading to map features marked with the corresponding element. When you clear one of those, the boss will drop a weapon or sometimes both weapons that deal that specific elemental damage. So this gives you a deterministic way of going after certain element damage types. So once you've cleared the early map features we talked about earlier and hit level 4, maybe level 5 safely, start looking around for those Marika churches that we discussed, and also scan for the element map markers that match the damage type that you're going for in this expedition that your current Night Lord is weak to. Earlier I mentioned the map clue you can get at the top of any fort. Ideally you hit one of these early and you already have one. These clues reveal the locations of scarabs marked with these little icons here on your map. Scarabs are important because they're your only source of talismans. You can equip 2 talismans at a time, and each one gives you a passive buff of some kind. You don't need to go massively out of your way for them, but once you picked up a clue, which you'll probably get anyway just from clearing a fort, the scarabs are usually close enough to justify a small detour. If they're visible on your map, they're typically just off your path a little. Some talismans are weak, but others are very strong, like a permanent boost to rune acquisition, or powerful passives like a 15% damage bonus to weapon skills. Definitely worth keeping an eye out for. Just grab the clue and then check your map for any scarabs nearby as you move between objectives. Having an offhand ranged weapon is very useful for solo play. As a solo player, you're often going to be outnumbered, especially in the open world. Being able to pick off 1 or 2 enemies from range can make all the difference between safely clearing a pack or getting combo stunned and dying, which can just completely derail your run. There's also a mechanical change in Nightreign, compared to base Elden Ring. In the original Elden Ring game, if you had a bow in your offhand and tried to shoot, your character would two-hand the bow, shoot, and then you'd have to manually switch back to your melee weapon. Very clunky and not user-friendly. In Nightreign, for starters, bows have just been improved across the board, they're faster and stronger, and more importantly, you can now shoot them directly from your offhand. If you've got a sword in your main hand and a bow in your offhand, pressing the offhand key binding or button will quickly draw and fire the bow, and then go straight back to your normal stance. It's smooth, fluid, and a big deal for solo play. You can apply the same principle with sorcery, for example, a staff using Glintstone Pebble in your offhand and a melee weapon in your main hand, which is a very standard setup for a sorcerer. This setup works especially well with the Iron Eye, who has high dexterity, great for running a katana or sword in your main hand, and a bow in your offhand for quick ranged picks. By now, I'm sure you know that all weapons have a passive buff, and for the most part, all 6 of those buffs are active at once. So you should keep filling out all 6 of your weapon slots with useful passive buff effects, like you've probably already been doing. But there's one passive I want to draw your attention to. This one here. It's worded a little oddly, but what it actually does is grant you a bubble shield after landing several consecutive hits. That shield then blocks part of the next incoming attack. This is fantastic for solo play, and it really helps with survivability. I really underestimated it. Definitely keep an eye out for it and prioritize it in one of your 6 slots. I usually find this buff on torches, seals, and shields. The weapon skill often matters more than the weapon type itself. In your solo run, you should be actively hunting for the best weapon skill you can find around the map. What you're really looking for are strong boss killer skills. Examples of this are stuff like Lion's Claw, Giant's Hunt, Piercing Fang and Impaling Thrust, Flame Strike, or anything with Bleed or Frost. Even some of the most basic ones, like starting skills Unsheath and Stamp Uppercut are quite good and do a lot of stance damage. The common function you're looking for here are relatively quick activations with a weapon that do a lot of damage and a lot of stance damage in particular, which these all do. Even if you're running a high strength Wilder and you come across something like a Cross Naginata with Bleed and Piercing Fang, which scales with dexterity more, that thing will delete bosses, and that's why the Wilder's well-rounded stats are so valuable. Now that advice applies to everyone, solo or co-op. But as a solo player, you also need to prioritize good AoE options, especially for those duo boss fights which can be brutal on your own. The demi-human duo in the first night boss, for example, is a nightmare if you don't have the right skills to deal with it. Some standout AoE skills, for example, are Horalu's Earthshaker, massive AoE with big stance damage and 2 activations, Hoarfrost Stomp, which is a spammable frost AoE that hits hard and builds frostbite very quickly, or Golden Land, which creates a wide AoE and then fires projectiles that track enemies, and you can follow up with another heavy attack. I'll be doing dedicated solo boss guides later, but for now, just keep in mind that the weapon art often matters more than the weapon itself. One of the most important things for a solo run is knowing about and getting the Wending Grace consumables from the NPC merchants around the map. They cost 10,000 runes each and act as a free self-revive. You can carry up to 2 during a run. You should try to pick one up around level 5 or 6 before the first night boss, especially if you're struggling with that boss or just want a safety net. But no matter what, you definitely want the second before going into the final boss, the Night Lord. You can grab that one after beating the second night boss. There's a shop between the second and the final fight where you can buy items. These are absolutely vital. 2 free self-revives plus your own cheat death passive can make or break a solo run. A quick random tip for solo players, these war camp icons with the fire element on the map are actually really easy to clear solo thanks to a neat trick with the flame chariots. If you haven't played Elden Ring before, you might not know this, but in Nightreign, thanks to your double jump, you can simply scale up the side or back of a flame chariot and spam your basic attack at the top. If you do this, you'll snap into the little flame vent or steam port, whatever it is, and one-shot it. And then you jump off and just run around and do the next one. 3 times in a row, super easy, super quick, and it's a great way to earn a solid chunk of runes and pick up an equipment reward. And lastly, there's a few utility consumables that are especially useful in solo play. You might not use these much in a normal or co-op run, but as a solo player, they can be really handy. A few examples off the top of my head are the Bewitching Branch, usually found at churches most often. You can use these on enemies to frenzy them, causing them to attack their allies, or your enemies. Super useful when you're dealing with large groups. It just creates a bit of chaos and makes it much easier to survive as a solo player. Sleep pots, sleep arrows, or even the sleep-based buffs on the passive buffs on some of the weapons are incredibly effective. You can, for example, put the bigger demi-human boss to sleep and deal with the smaller one first. Huge advantage in duo fights. Crystal darts, if you use these against imps or watchdogs, they'll actually turn against their allies. Very useful if you know when to use them. There are plenty more little niche tools like this. It's worth reading the item descriptions or even just googling them. The Elden Ring wikis are full of info, and many of these consumables can make a big difference in the right moment. Most are pretty situational and niche, but when those situations come up, they're absolutely worth having. Alright, and that's everything. If any of these tips helped, please drop a like or subscribe, or leave a comment if you've got other tips you found useful, or if there's something you want me to cover in more detail. I'm happy to help explain. Thanks for listening, everyone. Cheers.